Hello, everyone. Welcome. Looks like everyone's on mute. I think it puts you on mute automatically. But hey, we're gonna kind of get started softly. We're letting some people in. We've got a few attendees on, and we'll get some more. But so we'll do probably a few mini introductions while we wait for people to join. I'm Nneka Jenkins, and we have Regina here. You want to do an intro, Regina?
Hi, good evening. I'm Regina Wallace Jones, and while I can't see all of the faces, what I'm believing today is that the vast majority of people who are on this call are from East Palo Alto, Bellhaven, or Bellhaven. I am a city council member for the city of East Palo Alto, but as you know, we wrap our arms around Bellhaven because they are but a border away from us and have a lot of the same demographic profile that we have in EPA. I just want to say really, really quickly that tonight really, to me, represents the manifestation of so much, both the intentions and aspirations of these beautiful women who are here, Farralon and Nneka, but also the aspirations of so many community members that want guidance on how we can move from being renters to being owners in a more powerful way. And so we thought a lot about how to make this accessible, how to make it not be too much time, but also really insightful, how to make it when you can participate because you're not working, but are likely home and available to engage, but not too many hours because we know that you're doing a million things. But hope that over the next several weeks, we share something that is magical and that it catches fire and encourages even more to join in on the magic of ownership in the Bay Area. So I'm really excited for you to be here. Thank you for prioritizing it, and really excited about making impact on this aspiration together.
Awesome. Farralon?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Farralon Udom. I lead the board of the Delta San Francisco Peninsula Foundation, and one of our primary focuses is inciting sound personal finance habits. And we recognize that there's a lot of interest and commitment to learning about and being able to own real estate in the Bay Area. And it's not as simple as it might be in Nebraska. But what we are hoping for each one of you is that you realize that many of the narratives that are out there are designed for a certain group of people to get ahead, and they're not very inclusive. And there's still ways and strategies and tactics that each of us can deploy to be able to buy a home. So we have partnered with Nneka Jenkins, who is a phenomenal realtor here in the Bay Area. She actually helped me get my house last year. And she has clients across the entire spectrum. And she has a really unique story herself of her journey to buy properties in the Bay Area. And what was explicitly great about her is the tactics and the strategies that she's here. She's a fount of knowledge. And I hope that each one of you is able to ask and get exactly what you need. And across all the weeks that we're going to be doing this, we hope to answer all of your questions. And we're really open to your feedback and what you think will be most useful to you.
Awesome. My name is Nneka Jenkins. Thank you for that warm welcome, Farralon. So I just want to say a few words. Honestly, I'm probably the most excited to be here amongst everyone. I do want to go into a little bit about our individual journeys, but if I can just touch on why I'm here and why I'm so excited. To keep it as distinct as possible, my personal journey kind of merged into my real estate journey in that there were so many things that I wish I knew earlier that I feel I obviously am learning now. I feel like I'm always learning. I don't think I've arrived by any means, and I invite all of those learning opportunities. But there are so many things that I had to learn the hard way. And I felt like no one was showing me, no one was sharing the information. And I'm a firm believer in to whom much is given, much is expected. And it's so important to me that, you know, we're all going to fail forward and make our own mistakes. That's part of the journey. But if I can allow and help you guys not make some of the mistakes I made, I just get so fired up about that. And what I mean by that is little things like how my husband and I bought our first property. And we're going to kind of go into that. And I want to give some more time to people to come on. But some of the things that we were told when we bought our first property, after I thought I would never own a home ever here in the Bay Area, some of those things that we were told, complete lies and just half truths. And I'm still friends with some of those people before I was a realtor that helped me get my first home. But I think that there was a purpose in our journey because it lit a fire in me to make sure that other people didn't have to go through some of those things that I went through and didn't have to learn the hard way. Because I think if I knew some of those things, you know, 5 years earlier, 10 years earlier, imagine where I'd be, right? Imagine where my family would be. Imagine the generational wealth I would be, you know, I'd have a head start on. So that's part of my passion in all of this. I met Farralon a while ago, and after we got her first place, I remember her coming to me one day, maybe after one of her events for the Delta Foundation, and I remember her saying to me, you know, I know this lady named Regina. She used to be the mayor of East Palo Alto, and she's thinking about doing, you know, this basically. And I'm not kidding. It was probably 11, 12 at night, or it was super late that we were prepping for some event. And I basically said to her, you know, are you kidding? Are you asking me? Because I would love to do that. She literally presented an opportunity to me that was a manifestation of something I had been like working on for so long in my mind and never really had the guts to actually put it into works. And that's what this Onyx Wealth mindset is for me, of just teaching people the things that I didn't know, teaching people the things that I'm learning now. And now that I'm doing so much business in real estate, I'm in the same rooms with people that have access to different opportunities, that come from generational wealth. So they were taught different things that I was never taught, that I don't know about. So all of that to say, I'm so excited that you guys decided to join us. And like Farralon said, we're going to do this every week. And so there's different topics that are going to come out. But since this is the kickoff and the first day, I really want to use this as an opportunity for you guys to ask questions so that we make sure and gear this presentation towards you guys and what you guys are really looking for. So, I think we can probably get started. We've got quite a few more people in now. So just really quick, we've got Regina here. She's kind of, you know, started all of this she used to be the mayor of East Palo Alto, super passionate. We're all excited to be here. We've got Farralon here, chair with the Delta Foundation. She does a lot of events, and of course, we'll share some more information about what we do with you guys. But I would love to get started. If anyone, you have the ability to raise your hand in this forum. If you have any questions, I tend to talk fast, but at any time, please raise your hand if you have any questions. And if no one has any questions, we'll kind of get started and talk about how we kind of move forward and build generational wealth and give you some tactical ways and things to work on. Does anyone have any questions? I don't see any hands raised. Okay. All right. So the first thing I like to do, because I think it centers everyone, is Regina and Farralon, do you mind just going into your why? Like your why, just in general, what is your why? And maybe elaborate on that, and then we can get started.
Yeah, my why for this series is actually very personal. When I was a child, my parents did not have a ton of wealth. In fact, they were both union laborers. They worked for AT&T, and they were part of the community of workers that went on strike when wages were not right, and were also responsible for making sure that our communication infrastructure as a nation was reinforced. And I remember their journey to home ownership. And I also remember when they were 10 years old, they lost their home. and um, and that state of transitioning from being a homeowner to then being a renter lasted for another more than a decade before they were able to come back and purchase again. And as I think back, I mean, obviously, when I was 10 years old, I didn't have the wherewithal to process what was happening financially. I didn't have the wherewithal to process what was happening emotionally. You know, for me, family, wherever my family was, that's where home became. But as I got much older, it became so much clearer to me that that our finances and our financial health and wealth in part is tied to ownership. Not completely, right? I mean, there's plenty of people who are super wealthy that do not own a home, and there are plenty of people that own a home that are not super wealthy. Um, but if our goal is to create a sense of permanence, which we effectively lost when my parents lost their home because we started to move around a lot more, and when leases expired, we would re-up someplace else. And the only thing that was really consistent for me as a child was my schools, because no matter where we lived, my parents always drove me back to the schools that knew my name, right? That part was consistent for me. What I want for the next generation of children is that more parents, in particular more parents of color, have much greater clarity about what it means to move in, how to prepare to be an owner, what it means to be an owner, and also how to maintain that asset so that it can truly become part of the generational wealth for a family. It's really interesting because I just left this call for an individual who is running for supervisor in the county of San Mateo. And one of the things that he said, and I really like this guy a lot, but one of the things that he said was that my parents were not rich, right? My dad was a music teacher and my mom ran a school for the deaf and hard of hearing. We didn't have a lot of money. And at some point when they became middle-aged, they got lucky and inherited um, a home from their parents, which allowed them to buy a house for us for the first time. And for so many people of color, that moment where you get lucky and you inherit something from your parents that you may or may not have been expecting, that thing happens more rarely. And oftentimes, even when we are retiring our lives, like we're done, our affairs are not in order always, and we're not able to pass on assets to our children and our children's children that would help them build upon the work that we've done. So to me, it's just really important to start with the foundation of how do you do this well, and how do you create your own sense of permanence and path towards personal wealth. And it's also about how do we really start to accumulate assets that help us, our children, and our children's children engage with this world with even more strength. And so that's really my why. It's very personal. And when I look out on my neighbors, I want less of my experience and more powerful experiences for the next generation to help create our tomorrows.
I love that. Um,
Farralon, you
ah,
want to follow
okay,
that?
so Regina, yes, exactly. I tend to be a little bit more in my head, so and forgive me, more things will come out about me across time, but um, I am a wealth consultant, so I'm an advisor in my day job, and I used to be in the investment field, just on the buy side. Ignore what that actually means, but basically, I've learned a lot about the structure of money and investing, and that's always been important to me because I realized at a young age that money provides security and opportunity. And I got some opportunities that my family was not able to afford that made me very, very, very fortunate. And it set me on the path that I've been on now. Um, what I want to say about my reason for being here and why I'm super passionate about it is, oh, I guess we can define the problem as since 1979, so we're going on 40 plus years, there has been this quote conundrum of why wages have not kept pace with the gains in GDP in the United States and the gains in productivity. And there's a variety of answers that academics are fighting about. But one thing that is very true is that asset prices have exploded over that same time. So the owners of assets and the owners of capital are receiving an increasing share of the profitability of this country. That matters. That's a huge part of the narrative, in addition to the structural factors that are preventing people of color from being asset owners. That's a huge part of the narrative about why we are continuously worse off. And there was a paper written 4 or 5 years ago that said that Black households are likely to have zero wealth on average in the next 15 years. It's going down, not up. So it is critical to me to be a part of this community and to help any and everyone who wants to become an asset owner, who wants to become a homeowner, to own something and hold on to it, because Regina's absolutely right. That's a very important part of the game, because that is how you're going to build wealth. Somehow, every day, in every way that you can, we have to be strategic and think very thoughtfully about how we're going to take our wages and use them to become an asset owner, because I don't know if we can fight the wage trends. There's some folks working on that. But it is true that if you're not able to allocate what you earn to being an owner of capital, you will be further and further behind. So this is really, really serious business for me. I also think that the more diverse the owners of capital look like, the more the capitalist structure will change.
Mhm.
And so that matters. That's why I'm here.
um, that was great. So I think my why, I grew up in Nigeria in Africa, and we were pretty wealthy there, but I don't remember much of it. I moved to America when I was 4. So when I moved here, through a series of events, and my mom basically was struggling to just, put food on the table for all 3 of us. And long story short, she was busy trying to make sure we survived and saw a better life here in America. And I don't know that there was enough time in the day for her to. She already did a lot of things to make sure I understood how money worked, to do all of these things. She was in survival mode for a lot of it, and she worked her way out of a lot of situations, and she's doing amazing now. But I say that to say, one of my biggest issues, I think, when I moved to California, I've definitely lived with a scarcity mindset for most of my life. And I think as I've been intentional about adopting an abundant mindset and realizing, like Farralon touched on, there is so much wealth in this world. There's so much wealth right in front of us, and it is disproportionate to some communities for multiple reasons. I think realizing that truth and recognizing that that wasn't just for other people, that it actually could be for me as well. That was a huge aha for me, and I'm still reconciling that thought in my mind. And so for me, when we did finally buy our first home, it was a few years of sacrificing in different ways, to where when we finally were able to buy our first home, we had no idea what we were doing, but we just kept being in the right environments, keeping the right people around us to push us in the right direction. And I just kept taking notes. So what bothered me, though, is the idea that that somehow I was lucky and that's why I was in those right environments and this, that, and the other. And whether you think lucky or worked hard or whatever, to me, I think every single person deserves that opportunity. And I think it's really sad that we don't make sure everyone has that that type of information to push them forward. So my why is thinking about who I was before without that information and how lost I felt. Right now, I'm in the phase of my life where we're finally getting the type of family home I've wanted. And I say that if you know me, you understand how emotional this journey currently right now is for me because, sorry, I get hot and cold pretty fast. Because before I saw the real estate as a means to an end, and not so much an end, but just a means to growth. And that was good for the time being. But there was a part of me that never truly felt at peace in general, and always felt this anxiety about like, I got to keep pushing, and what if I'm broke tomorrow, and this, that, and the other. There was this anxiety within me because there was nothing backing me, right? There was no trust fund, there was no and I'm not knocking anyone that has those opportunities, but the problem is that I think people forget how to live, or how uncomfortable and anxiety ridden of a life it is when you're not sure where the next check is going to come from or if it's going to be enough. And then once you start having your own family. And so what I learned to value was how secure I started to feel just being, right? And I'm still working on that because I was always just so aggressively, working for that next thing and not really thinking about the bigger picture, owning assets. What does that actually mean? How does money really, really work? Because it's not just get the paycheck, pay the bills and whatever, because that's how I lived my life. And so as I started learning more things, and I'm still learning more things, I think I'm now adopting and picking up the tools from smart people around me. Like when I met Farralon, she's coming to me for me to help her buy a home. She just still doesn't even understand how much she's taught me. The things that she knows about money and understands about money, I never felt I was taught. I never felt anyone sat down and actually had that conversation with me. I never had that access to those type of people that are in those rooms with people that make millions of dollars a year because they understand money on a different level. So my why is thinking about my daughters. My husband and I have 4 girls and 1 boy. And I'm thinking about my daughters and how much further ahead they're going to be just because I made sure they understand how it moves, how money works in America, how, the different tools. And Farralon spoke to, one thing I will say about myself, I have strengths and I have weaknesses. I'm very honest about both. One of the things I know about me is I'm very tenacious and I'm very resourceful. If there's anything to find out about anything, I'm going to make sure I know it. And and if I don't know it 100%, I'm going to make sure to get with that person that does. So what I mean by that is some of the things we're going to go into about how, hey, I don't, some of you might be thinking, this is all big and up here, and I don't know how I'm going to buy my first home. I can barely pay my rent. I'm going to tell you how my husband and I rented rooms in our household, renting someone else's house just to stack money so that we could buy our first place, right? You got to start small and know that there's a bigger picture, and that's okay. Okay, so that's my why. Does anyone have any questions? I'm looking at the chat. I don't see any questions. Okay, so I'm gonna get started. I want to tell you guys a story first. So I live right now in the South Bay, but my husband and my husband is from the East Bay, or from San Francisco, and lived in the East Bay. And we actually, I know this, a lot of people on this webinar are from East Palo Alto. We actually have a couple units in East Palo Alto, and we just put them up for rent actually last night. It's been in his family for quite some time. So I want to tell you guys a story of how I never thought I would be able to buy a house, ever, ever, ever. Long story short, we're living in Fremont, and we're living in a 2-bedroom at the time. We were renting out one of the bedrooms. Everyone in his family, and probably a little bit of mine, was making fun of us. How could you live with somebody else? How could you do that in your house? This, that, and the other. We knew in our minds we wanted to save money, and that was how we were doing it. And back then, it's popular now, but I'm talking like 6-7 years ago. It wasn't that popular, okay? And so we rented out a room. And that was that. And then I had the brilliant idea. My husband didn't like this idea at the time, but I said, you know what? Let's rent a 4-bedroom house that we can barely afford, and we'll rent out 3 of the rooms. So we rented a 4-bedroom and we rented out 3 of the rooms. One day outside, and again, at that time, I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I was okay sacrificing because I was used to that. And, we were just saving money. And part of that, it was a survival, right? That's how we were paying our bills, whatever. I was not in real estate at the time. I'm outside doing something and someone gets lost in the street. And she happens to be a realtor. Long story short, we're just talking and she brings up, oh, your husband was in the military? What about the VA loan? Now, I'm going to stop there because this is the part of my story where I tell you why I'm so passionate about VA and FHA, which we're going to get into because that's some of the tools that you're going to be able to use with a lower down payment to get your first home. My husband was in the military, and the military didn't even make sure my husband knew how to use his military VA loan. I hope that resonates with you. He served in the military and there was no course, no, hey, because of what you did for us and for the country and whatever, here's how we're going to help you use this loan. No, they gave it to him, but they never taught him about it or how can you use it and all of that. And I met a client later that came to me and said that her former realtor told her she can't use a VA or FHA in Oakland because they just don't allow it. That's all she said to her. And then that was the end of it. And I remember asking her, where do you work? She said, oh, I work for the VA. I said, I'm sorry, what? I said, I work for the VA. And she goes, but I don't know how this works. And she's coming to me. I don't work for the VA. I said, why haven't anyone that you work with, why can't you go there? Why isn't there a resource there of telling you how to use your VA loan and how powerful it is? She said, no, it's the government. And the way my sister put it, it's the government. Do you really expect them to tell you how to use the tools that are available to you? So long story short, within a year of that lady in the middle of the street, and I've never told her this story, I should reach out to her and tell her because I remember, I know who she is. But anyway, it was a year later that we got his certificate of eligibility and all the things that you need for the VA loan. It was a year later. And that day I was aggressive about, I'm sorry, you have a VA loan that allows you to put less money down. Yeah, we're buying a house. And we bought a house within a year. What makes me sad about that is I didn't know, my husband didn't know, and we're surrounded around a lot of people, some homeowners, older people or not, and no one's sharing the information. I got this feeling that when people arrived, when people had, whatever they needed out of life, they weren't going back to share it with people. And so that was kind of my journey to just realizing if it's happening to me, that happened to a lot of people. And so even though, like Farralon mentioned, I do a lot of higher end and I do a lot of lower, if you know me and you talk to anyone at my brokerage, they will tell you like Nneka will work her butt off to get anyone into a property, no matter what the price point is, because I think that it is very sad that this society, this community, this Silicon Valley doesn't want to pay attention to the people that have less than 20% down. What is that about? Why are we telling people that if you don't have 20% down, you can't buy a home? That is the biggest myth, and I'm here to dispel it. So if any of you are sitting there thinking, okay, well, I'm looking at these prices and maybe, $500K in Oakland or a duplex, because there are some, we'll talk about that, as the weeks go on. If you're sitting there doing the math and 20% and you say, well, it's going to take me forever to come up with that amount, I'm here to tell you that that is a lie. The reason why you hear that so much, and I have a couple of realtors that are on here and I know them well and they will speak to this too, but there are some realtors that will, won't like what I'm about to say, but the truth is that it is harder for a realtor to get you into contract in such a competitive market with less down payment. But harder does not mean impossible. So for me, that's a barrier I'm willing to go up against, because when you understand how the loans work and you can speak to them, you can easily tell the listing agent on the other side what they need to hear to know that you are not going to let that loan fall through. That's all they're looking for. But if you come across it like, oh, I'm sorry, will you please take my client's offer? They only have 5% down and you don't understand how the product works, yeah, your offer is not going to get accepted. So I want to just say one thing to all of that. I am here because I'm passionate to help you get a home. I do not care if you use me as a realtor or not. That is not what I'm here for. In fact, I will talk to you about some of the projects outside of California that my husband and I are doing. It doesn't all have to be here. But if you're living here and you're paying rent, there's no reason you should not be trying to own something, even if owning it means you immediately have to rent out a room. Doesn't matter to me how you do it, but if Farralon's message to you didn't ring true, let mine ring true to you. There are so many people that I have helped even a year or 2 years ago with 5% down, as little as a $500,000 home to 1.5, and I'm not exaggerating, that it's 2 years, now they're buying their second home, or they're trading up from that condo and now they're calling me, Nneka, COVID killed me, I need to get out of this. And they have equity. Do you understand what I mean by equity? They bought that property, they put the minimum amount down, they paid their mortgage, all of that, and here they are just 2 years later, and they have enough built up equity, meaning their home price or their home that they bought appreciated in value to a level to where they have equity, and they can either trade up on that equity, or they can go and they can trade up and buy a new house, or they can use that equity, get a refinance, and use that money for some other thing. So please raise your hands if this is not making sense to you, but I want to just make it clear that by owning something, you now have an asset. And because we're in a competitive, appreciating part of California, part of the country, right? That asset is continually appreciating. You are making money as you're sleeping. Let me break that down in another way. The interest rates are about 3%, 4%, whatever they are, okay? Let's just call it 3%. If California appreciates, the Bay Area appreciates on average about 7.66% per year, that means that loan that you took that is a 3%, you're appreciating at more than double that on average. Most years, the appreciation is in the double digits. So you are making money on top of not wasting money on rent by buying a property in this competitive area. I'm not seeing questions. I know I talk fast, so I'm sure that's making sense. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat. I do have one question here. I'll get to that one in a second. But I want to just stress that, excuse me, the people that say, oh, well, we're in a bubble and the market's going to crash and this, that, and the other. I get it. I get it. From 2008, that was scary. I get it. I can't predict the future, and this is being recorded, so I'm not going to pretend to put any assumptions out there of what the future is going to hold. But one thing I will tell you is when you're listening to those people that are saying, don't ever buy anything, the market's going to crash and all of that stuff, the one thing you have to keep in mind is the difference between what happened in 2008 and any market correction, which we're always going to have market corrections, but anything that could happen. 2008 was built on a lot of faulty stated income loans. So in a nutshell, because I could go on that tangent for a very long time, but in a nutshell, what that means is a lot of the loans that were being given out in that time before that market crash shouldn't have been given out at all. That's why you saw so much reform. So I'm saying that to say the type of loans since 2008 that have been given out, the type of those loans are 100% different than those loans that were given out before. So they're backed on more equity, more real money, not stated income loans. So we are going to have a market correction. Do I know when? No. But if you're trying to buy a home that you're going to live in, and you have reliable income coming in, good cash flow to pay that bill, and we talked about how you sacrifice, maybe you rent out a bedroom to pay that mortgage on a short term or something like that, then maybe it still makes sense for you to buy something, because even when the market dips a little bit in the past, just look at historical data, always picks up, right? Because like Farralon mentioned, and maybe she can touch on it a little bit again and just elaborate, our wages are increasing and the market, there's real money out there. There's real money being flushed into the system that people are able to get these quality loans that are backed by solid money, not stated income loans. Farralon, can you touch on just kind of what you were mentioning about where the wealth, where money is going and how secure that could be? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry.
Oh,
Yes, yeah, I usually double mute myself because I have a paranoia. So I apologize. And that results in like grandma moments like this where here I am wasting 20 seconds talking about being double muted. But yes, so wages are increasing. They're just not increasing nearly as fast as assets are increasing, and they're increasing just in line or a little bit underneath actually inflation. So in real terms, wages have actually not grown, but in real terms, assets have become a lot more valuable across time. What you're seeing in the Bay Area is, yes, there's a dichotomy of folks who are actually very high income earners, but coincidentally, a lot of those folks also receive stock awards and can have, if there's an IPO liquidation, whatever, we all know the story, they end up with a significant amount of money that's actually invested in typically the stock market. I would actually argue that some of the current frenzy that we are experiencing right now in the Bay Area is the emotional turmoil that COVID has caused when everyone has to live at home, coupled with those who have made a lot of money in the last year in the stock market, because the bottom of the market was March 2020 and it dipped about 35%. Since then, we've had a really, really strong rally, like really, really. Now there's a little retrenchment in tech, but by and large, many folks have made 40, 50% this year. So they're able to kind of use that. I think that that wealth that's been created with the stock market is allowing people to regularly bid up homes
Mhm.
in the Bay Area and say, well, I just really want this house and I need it because, to your point, Nneka, I don't want to be divorced. My kids are driving me crazy. And if I have the money, I value my peace of mind
mhm.
and I value easy, right? So um, I think that that's one dynamic. I think the second one to really pay attention to is that all of you also have the ability to do this as well. Nneka's talking to you about sacrifices. Um, you can make that same 40% that someone else made with $100. There are platforms that will allow you to make that exact same investment, right? Um, and it's about the biggest achievements we make are about incremental gains compounded across time.
Mhm.
Getting a little bit better at what you're doing consistently and allowing that to compound actually pays enormous dividends. And that is what you can do with your hard earned money that you work for every day. You find little small ways to tinker around margins of both income and spending to the extent that you are comfortable. I 100% appreciate the hustle, and I've had several instances of my own hustle as well. There was a time when I had bought a house in Texas and I was living off of I had to eat off of $50 a week, all in. Now I was in my 20s and I was young, but I only bought things that were on sale. I ate a lot of chilies because I couldn't even, I couldn't buy, canned beans. I had to buy dried beans and like soak them. Had the meat and the produce that were on sale, and I made it work. I actually didn't starve. I was in LA at the time, but it's possible to do these things and make sure that all the effort that you're putting into going to work every day, that it results in you being able to own assets, because that's what's really going to grow and provide for your future self, your children, your children's children, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. I wanted, I loved what you said at the end there because, I have people that have come to me in the past and say, and maybe some of you on this feel this way, but some people have come to me in the past and said, well, I have student loans and I want to pay those off before I buy a house. I can't tell you what to do with your money. But I 100% think that that's a bad idea to wait to buy a house in this type of an environment before your student loans are paid off. You don't have to, do what I did. But the reason I say that is the interest, you always want to look at how much your money is costing you. The interest rates on student loans, like Farralon was just talking about some of those things, the interest rates on student loans are so low that to have that keep you from building that type of equity that Farralon was just talking about and how much it's appreciating and how faster than your wages. What does that mean? You can work at your job for 40 years and put your head down and do it, but that little, casita home or whatever that you own, that's going to appreciate in value more than any of your raises. Okay? So, I decided to buy my first home before my student loans were paid off. I think we put a couple in forbearance and the other ones we paid whatever. It didn't matter to me. The interest rates were low. And then 3 years into owning our second place, when we went to refinance it, we accumulated so much equity in our property that we were living in that my savvy, experienced lender said, well, I don't recommend you do a cash out. You can if you want, but since you don't need the money, we're going to refinance your home. That cash out, the money you would pull out from the loan, we're going to use that to pay off your student loans. So we had no more student loans and a lower payment on our house. I mean, that's a no-brainer for me, right? Does that happen every single time? No, but there's easy ways to make that happen. So for me, I made money on my house. I was living in a home I loved. We grew our family, things were going good. And within a couple years, I refinanced out of that previous loan into a better loan and the interest rate dropped. And then I paid off the student loans that were at 1% and 2% interest rate anyway. So I think the question, I'm going to go to this question from Krista. Thank you for asking. It's what would be the first steps suggested when building generational wealth? We've talked a lot about our whys and these situations, but when I think of generational wealth, I'm thinking of my kids' and how they're going to be better off and live a more peaceful life because they won't have to worry about some of the things I did. That's what it means to me, right? So for me, my first step to anyone would be get the right people in your corner. I'm from Africa, like I mentioned. We have this thing called the village, physically and figuratively. And so for me, my village here in America, my village here on my real estate team are the professionals I keep in my corner and have amazing relationships with, and I trust them for what they do in their profession, right? So I have this saying, and some of my team is on here, they're going to hate that I always say this, but I used to pride myself on being the jack of all trades. Now I'm 100% finding a jack in every trade. Let me break that down. I learned the hard way. Actually, I should say the easy way. We did our taxes with H&R Block for a while. When we bought our first home, the H&R Block professional said, hey, I adore you. I love you coming in here, giving me business. I really would love to see you, but don't tell my boss. Literally, he said this, don't tell my boss, but your taxes are becoming so complicated. You should go to a CPA. I wouldn't have gone otherwise. It was easy. He was doing my taxes, whatever. He said, no, you need to be strategic about how you're filing your taxes and how your money is working for you, what you're writing off, what you're doing. Your business is growing every year. If he didn't push me out of that, I wouldn't have found my CPA that I now refer everyone to. So to me, the first step is having people where they need to be. So you're sitting there thinking, okay, now you're making it sound like I can own a home. So who do I talk to? You find a good realtor, someone who gets it. Doesn't mean they have to be in the business 30 years. It doesn't mean that they do business in your exact city. I'm here to tell you 80% of the homes, it's the 80-20 rule. 20% of the realtors in this market do 80% of the business, okay? What I'm saying to you is that it is super important to align yourself with someone that understands the market. It's less about the neighborhood. It's more about the market. I will say that till I'm blue in the face. And the reason is the neighborhood matters. You want them to understand where you live. But I say it's more about the market in general because you're getting people moving from here, there, and everywhere. You need a realtor that understands. The rest is resources. We're not back in 20 years ago where realtors literally had a book and didn't have the internet and don't know where this street is and that street is. That stuff is resourcefulness. You can figure that out. You need a realtor that understands what's the purpose of a savvy, quality lender. Do you need a lender or do you need a broker? Okay, so you need a quality realtor if you're going to buy a home. You need a quality CPA person. Who's doing your taxes? Do you have a side hustle over here and a main job over here, and you need to figure out how that money is going to work together to get you the right borrowing capabilities that the bank needs to see from you to get you into that property? When we bought our first home, we were wise enough then I think it was our second home. No, yeah, it was our second home. When we said, okay, I know I need to afford this. We have a side hustle and we're working. We had to sit down with our tax person. How do I need to structure this so that I can afford that home? Let me break down what I just said. If your goal is to save as much money as possible and write off everything, then I hope you're not planning on buying something in a year. So we actually paid more in taxes the entire year before we bought our first home on purpose. We didn't write off as many things as we could because the bank needs to see that you can afford it. I hope that makes sense to everyone. So that would be a realtor, a CPA, maybe depending on your financial structure, maybe you consult a financial planner. I do not believe that that is critical if you don't have your own home yet. I think that there's time for that, right? So making sure you have the right people in your corner to give you good advice. You don't know what you don't know. So your friend that does it on the side and this, that, and the other, maybe they're not the best person because do they have all of the resources that you might need to make informed decisions about your situation? Okay. Regina, do you want to touch on any of that?
Well, I, not knowing the financial situation of everyone who's joined, what I know for sure is that there's an aspiration to own. But I feel like from the stories that I've heard from many of my residents, there is this, there are a couple of things going on. One is the gap between what I earn and what I think I need to earn to afford housing in this area. So that's one. Demystifying that, I think, would be really useful. I remember my great grandfather used to say, never live in a home that costs you more than a quarter of what you bring home every year to live in. Mm-hmm. And so that was our rule of thumb for decades until we hit the point in time when it was much easier to get into houses with much smaller down payments, right? So demystifying that and making it clear for this community feels important. And then the other thing for me is demystifying the down payment, right? Because you've talked about not needing 20%. I mean, even in the city of East Palo Alto, the median house even here is up over $1 million. And so if you're operating by the 20% rule, what you're thinking mentally is, I need $200,000 to even get in the conversation for a home in East Palo Alto or anywhere for that matter. And even if I have enough money to make a mortgage payment, I don't see myself having $200,000 saved up at any point in time to be able to afford one of these houses. So maybe working through some scenarios with this community so that some of those initial fears start to get demystified, and then we can start digging in the future weeks and sort of how to get there.
Absolutely. So I love that. So I'll just tell a couple stories. About 2 years ago, there's been several, but one is I helped a young couple, never owned a home together, and they bought a triplex, $950,000 triplex with 3.5% down. Okay. So there are ways it can work. It can happen. 20% down is not the end all be all. So the first step for that, to break that down, is you have to talk to a lender. I don't care, and I tell everyone that comes my way this. I don't care if you come to me and say, Nneka, I will not buy a house for another year, maybe a year and a half. That doesn't matter to me. If you know that that's what you want to do in the future, the best way to have a proper roadmap is to get a pre-approval. You might think that you can afford 500K and the bank might tell you 400. You might think that you can afford a 700K triplex and the bank might tell you, no, 850. The reason I bring out those examples is there's so many factors to buying the home and the financials and the way it works. You will never be able to predict how the bank is going to view you. For example, you might be approved for a $500,000 single family house on your own. And then you might say, okay, so that means I'm approved for a $500,000 triplex. No. $500,000 of single family home, you might be approved for a $750,000, $800,000 triplex. The reason why it's not something you can just plug into some spreadsheet online is because every triplex is different. What if the rental income coming in on one triplex is more than 50%? Let me break that down. You have 3 units that you're buying. If you're going to buy it, one of them has to be vacant for you to move into, because to use these lower down payment opportunities, you have to live in the property. So if it's on the market and all 3 units are occupied, it's a no-go unless someone's moving out. Okay, so let's pretend one of the 3 units is vacant, meaning you can move in. The other 2 are occupied. If you get a loose pre-approval from a lender that says you can get up to 800K on a triplex, it'll be a loose one, because if those 2 units are bringing in $2,500 a month total, and then they're going to look at you and say, can you afford to buy this property? They're going to offset your debt to income ratio based on the rental income that's coming in from those 2 other units. Please raise your hand if that doesn't make sense. I'm going to repeat it in a different way. If the income that is coming in on 2 of the 3 units in the triplex is sufficient, is enough for the bank, they're going to offset that against what they require of you for your ability to pay, right? And then you can afford more. So understanding what you're pre-approved for a regular house versus a multi-unit is so important for your first step when you're even thinking about ownership, because I'm a firm believer in you can't do what you can't see, right? So representation matters, that kind of thing. But also when you write down a goal, for me, when I write it down, then I'm going to hold myself accountable. So I almost don't write down my goals sometimes because they'll be so big, right? So I won't write it down. If you talk to a lender and they tell you right now you're approved for 500, but looking at your credit, I see this thing from way back then. If you got rid of that, which could take you maybe 2 months, I can approve you for 200K more. If you have that kind of knowledge and information, don't you think you'll be making better and different decisions about what to do in the next coming months? Will you be eating at Starbucks every single day, wasting that money? Or will you be mindful about, I want to get there and I only need 3.5% to do it, so I'm going to spend my money a little differently. I'm going to save my money a little differently. I'm not going to splurge. Whatever the case is, it gives you a vision, a map, a roadmap of what you need to do to get to that affordability. So if you're already renting somewhere and you're paying $3,000, right? You're renting somewhere, and then they tell you your mortgage would be $3,000, and you can buy in this area in this price point, and then I can increase that price point by this much if you do these minor things. And then you say, oh well, I might get a raise by then, and and this and that and whatever. You're going to make different life decisions when you have those things laid out for you. So 100%, if it hasn't been clear already, you get the right people in line and you get a pre-approval. Farralon, go ahead.
2 things. I think we are at the hour, but it is very perfect because I am hearing homework. So for everyone who has been on this call, your assignment is to speak to a lender and start having these conversations. And I guarantee that if you start having these conversations, many of you may have questions about what you were told, and that can be the perfect fertile ground to talk next week. Nneka's been very clear about pre-approval. One thing that I didn't know when I bought my first place is I really did not understand the difference between pre-qualified and pre-approval. Use her specific language. When you call a lender, you want a pre-approval, not a pre-qualification. Anything else, Nneka? Do you think you want to tell them when they call? Is there a way that they should think about who to reach out to as a lender?
That's a great question. So, for number 100%, you're gonna have them ask you, hey, to run your credit. And I know some people think, no, I don't want it to hit my credit. It's gonna hurt my credit. It's literally a couple points. It's worth it. Do it. Doesn't mean you have to buy a house tomorrow. It means that they can have an accurate view of your financials and tell you what the interest rate would be and tell you what your actual payment will be. You can't just have the conversation and they're going to be shooting in the sky, giving you this, that, and the other. I have great lender contacts that will talk with you, even knowing that you're not going to buy anything anytime soon. Sometimes when you call a random lender and you're not introduced to them with someone, they don't have a ton of time because they're really, really busy. And so you want someone that understands, hey, I might not purchase tomorrow, but they're going to give you the information you need. And so if you just want to have that conversation, I have a great contact that will be very, very informative to tell you what you need to know. So yeah, that is great homework for sure. Thank you, Farralon. Oh, I think we have a chat. Let me see the questions. Can you share lender contact? Yes, I can. Do you want me to put it here in the chat or just email it to everyone? Okay, sure. Let me do that right now.
I'm more action oriented. Throw it in the chat right now. That's a lower barrier. So if people just sit here, just sit in your seat just a little longer.
Yes.
And you can copy and paste the chat, and then we're not waiting for you to look for it tomorrow morning once the day starts.
And everyone, just so that he understands and prioritizes you when you text him or call him, his name is Shane Valente, you tell him Nneka sent you. The reason is they are very, very busy. A good lender is very, very busy. I want him to understand that I sent you. He will prioritize getting you that pre-approval and having a conversation with you. I just put it in the chat. Everyone can see it. His name is Shane Valente. He is a broker and he's going to be a wealth of knowledge. So if any of you have any questions, I want to also.
Has anyone raised a hand? Because,
no?
Oh, now I know where my chat went. See, I'm the grandma. I was like, where is the chat?
Yeah, I don't see any raised hands. I've been watching it under attendees. No, but I'm going to send.
But I do see the Shane Valente.
Yes.
You see his
and
info.
So I'm sending.
And that's his cell phone. You can text him.
Yes.
Look at these resources.
Yes. And then, so one thing I was thinking, Farralon and Regina, is I would love to start a Facebook group of people that have attended, right? So the people that have attended, and as it goes, so that I can share some resources within that Facebook group and we can chat. And as new people join, right, from week to week. So let us know if you want to be a part of that. I put the Instagram handles here and emails. And actually, I missed Farralon's. I'll add that to it. But yeah, we really just want to be a resource. As Regina and Farralon mentioned, we will dive into some of these topics, quite a few topics. There's probably going to be some people on here. Maybe you have a property and you don't know what to do with it. We're going to give you options. Farralon is very familiar with one of them. How do I buy the next property before selling the other one? I have nowhere to go. It's COVID. There's so many resources we want to share with you guys, and it's going to span across several weeks. So, and anything you guys want to hear about, just message us, send it. You'll get these reminders for the webinar each week, and send us a note about it, and we'll provide information on it moving forward. And after each call, you're going to get some information from me of just some resources on what we talked about. Regina?
I love that. And for residents of EPA, they know that I'm super responsive on Facebook Messenger. So if all else fails and you feel like you don't know how to get a hold of anyone, just message me and I'll connect you from there.
Awesome. I love it. This is great. I really appreciate everyone. I still don't see any hands raised, so I'm going to assume that everything made sense, and we're all going to press forward and think about generational wealth and how we can change our own lives and the lives of people around us. There is more to come. My husband and I are starting a nonprofit called Onyx Wealth, actually, and And it's going to be more resources on how people can leverage other people's resources to get them into property. One thing that's super important to us is, as we are seeing more and more success, we really want to make sure that we take care of our community at large, wherever that is, really, because like I said, we live in the South Bay, but we have roots in the East Bay, and we do a lot of business along there and in the peninsula. And so we're trying to find ways where you can use resources that don't say things like you can't sell this house for 45 years, right? So there's some below market programs, and I'm not knocking them. They're great if you want to get into that home, but we're talking about owning the asset outright so that you get to decide what you do with that asset and the equity it builds in 3, 5, 10 years, right? So we're trying to start a nonprofit to where we can allow people to leverage other resources, other income, as long as they can show proof of their willingness and their goals of contributing towards their own or someone else's generational wealth, so that we can get more and more people into owning assets. So more of that to come.